The Connector Next Door is your invitation to meet the natural connectors all around us. They represent the everyday event planners who are energizing their communities every single day. Their stories are familiar, fun, and full of charm. Your host, Lisa Garrow, is a lifelong event planner and has been a connection strategy coach for over a decade. She knows events can become energized connecting points where communities can gather and grow. Let's listen in as she strikes up a conversation with today's Connector Next Door.
Cathy Derksen is a catalyst and disruptor, supporting and inspiring midlife women to discover their brilliance and step into new possibilities. As the founder of her company, Inspired Tenacity Global Solutions, Inc., Cathy helps women take on the courage to face major challenges in their life. Cathy's an international speaker and a 12-time best-selling author who inspires her audience to dream big and take a leap of faith into reaching for their goals. She's created a platform supporting women to share their own inspiring stories in books, retreats, and mastermind opportunities. With her all-in-one program, Cathy takes soon-to-be authors from chapter concept to published best-selling author in a simple, exciting process. Cathy lives near Vancouver, Canada, where she enjoys spending time in nature, traveling, meeting new people, and connecting with her community all around the world. Through our conversation, you'll hear loud and clear how Cathy is creating a ripple effect of impact by helping women share their stories and wisdom. It takes courage to connect deeply with our own story and tenacity to share it even when it's hard. I'm so glad you get to hear how Cathy helps women find the courage and take the leap. Well, welcome back everyone to the Connector Next Door and to another special conversation here on Season 3. We are now starting Season 3 in the last couple of months, and it's just been so incredible to be meeting people all over the world and more people in Canada, which is so much fun to see people in my own country. People like you, Cathy, that are in that space where this is just part of your world. So welcome here. I'm so glad you're here, and we'll dig into your work and all that other good stuff in time, but I'm glad that you have the time to join me today.
Well, thank you very much, Lisa. It's great to be here.
One of the incredible things is that when I ask, what does connection mean? We're getting all sorts of answers to that question. We all come from a different perspective, have our own journey, we've got our own expression, we have things that happen in our life that lead us to an understanding and an experience of connection. So could we start there? What does connection mean to you? And I'd love to hear your answer. I'm thrilled that you're here, and I'd love to hear your answer on that one.
For me, connection is when people come together with some common theme. And for me, it's only been in the last few years that I've realized that connecting is one of my core skills. And before that, in my original career, I worked in a hospital lab most of the time, and it was very isolated. And I guess maybe I just didn't have the opportunity to discover it in that environment. So it really wasn't until I left that environment, I went into financial planning. And at that point, I just started developing this connection. I think part of it is all the networking you do when you're in that industry. And I realized that I found myself kind of looking for connections for other people as much as for myself. So whenever I'd meet somebody new, my brain would be thinking, oh, who can I connect that person with? And so it's really been kind of in discovering that and kind of following that in the last few years that I've realized that that is actually my calling, is to be a connector, because that's what really comes completely natural to me.
So when you say that it's your calling, like, is that something that you feel like when you realize that for yourself, is it something that you now see that it's been happening all these years? It's just something literally that is natural for you.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. And when I first started into my own business, so in that world of an entrepreneur, which has now been about 3 years, and I found that a huge part of creating success in that was in listening to my intuition. and
Mm.
following really where it was telling me yes here, no there. And it really was in that process of understanding and listening that I realized that where I get that excitement and that real spark of, hey, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, it's when I'm connecting people. And
Mm.
part of with the books that I'm doing now, I find that that is one of the big things that really excites me about those projects is we're bringing together, every project is 20 to 25 women, most of which that had never met before, coming from
Mm.
all over the world, different environments, different careers, bring them together in a group where they're now working on a project together. And it's amazing the collaborations and the relationships that come out of these projects once I've brought these people together.
And what's so cool about that is it's actually it seems like there is some kind of common denominator, some kind of you've got a spark for something or an idea for something or a topic or something. Maybe you can share with us a couple of topics that you're working on right now. But it's amazing when you put something out there and then people can identify with it and say, that sounds like me, or that's something
Yes,
I've been talking
yes,
about. And the beauty of what you're talking about here is that if you do get 20 women that are identifying with a particular struggle or a particular part of life or a particular challenge or a particular joy in their life, whatever
yes,
that
yes.
is, that we can meet at that place and it can become this place of curiosity of what else, right? Because we've got some kind of a common denominator.
And almost a shared wisdom in a way
Mm.
too. And
Hmm.
so far this year, the books that I've been working with, so in January was Embrace Courage. So again, courage I find
Mm.
is such a common theme that as we realize that it's such a big part of our life, I found that word alone drew people to it. And then using
Mm.
embrace courage, to me, that's an action step. Okay, how can I be courageous? And one of the other ones was midlife awakening. And I think so many of us, whether we're in our 40s and up, many of us have had some experience where we've stepped into something new, whether we've just reinvented our life completely. But this whole midlife journey is one
Mm.
that really, I think, is easier to handle when we do it together. So it's good on that, working together. And even one of the
Yeah.
ones I've got right now is the ripple effect of impact. And
Mm.
again, so many entrepreneurs, that's their real goal, is to create impact.
Hmm.
And that idea that we're actually creating a ripple effect with the impact we're having, I think just expands it even more. So yes,
Hmm.
people hear these titles and they think, that's it, that's me. And that's actually where I got started in books in the first place. The one book that came out that I got involved in first was Emotional Intelligence, Mental Health Matters. And at that point, I had just been through a divorce and a career change and all sorts of big changes in my life. And just that theme just called to me. And I thought, nope, that's my book. I'm going in that one. And that's how I find that it really works, is that people hear the title, they hear the theme, and they're either drawn to it or they're not.
And where do you see the readers come into this equation?
Well, I think it comes from the same pool. And I think many of us have this inspiration that we want to be writers and we want to be published authors, but we're not always ready to step into that yet.
Mm.
And so I would say it's the readers and the writers are coming from the same pool of women, but there's a group that either feels that, okay, I'm ready to share my story on paper, or okay, this is something I'm comfortable doing. And then there's another group that isn't quite comfortable with putting it out there in the world, but they share that interest, they share
Mm.
that desire for that, connecting on that level of what's been your experience, what's your journey, and how can I learn from you.
And when you're talking about, I think you used the word embracing courage.
Yeah.
And so when we see others telling their stories, or picking a piece of their story or something that they want to share, and they craft that and they work with you and they get this into a book format where it can be read. I love publishing, even before there was sort of that whole self-publishing world way back when. Was there ever a time that people didn't self-publish? But I love that it's open to anybody now, and that we all have this opportunity, like you say, when you're ready.
The idea that each chapter is a standalone story, a standalone just example of what somebody else has taken on or been through. And I
Hmm.
find those to be a really easy read. And especially in this day and age when we are so busy and there's so much going on, quite often you only have, 10 or 15 minutes that you're going to sit quietly and do something. And you
Exactly.
can get through a chapter. The books that I do, they're usually 2,000 to 2,500 words. So that's 4 to 5 pages on a
Hmm.
paperback. So that's what I find, that they're just such a simple, easy read. And yeah, that's the goal, that we are giving that little bit of motivation and inspiration and some how-tos, and that people can just pick up just from that quick little connection.
Exactly. When we first connected, and I actually don't know when the first touch point was, where I saw your name and I was curious about your bio, and the words inspired tenacity really stood out to me. And it's something that, and I think when we talked the first time, I said that is just something my mom has always talked about, and the idea of really that stick-to-itiveness, or the tenacity to keep going. And life has all sorts of twists and turns and things that might end up in a book someday. But can you tell us where that came from, and what part of your world does that inspire tenacity show up for you?
Yeah, it's interesting that that title for my name, for my business, it really did just come to me as part of that intuitive journey that I started on. And again, that was sort of as my divorce was unfolding, selling the house, becoming a single mom, having a full career change, and just in that huge life shift I was in. And that's really when I did start really learning to listen to my intuition. And that came to
Mm,
me one time, and it just hit me that those are a couple of the key factors that we need for any major change in our life. We need that inspiration of what needs to happen, what our goals are, but then we need that tenacity to just keep going. And going through all the things that I was going through at that time, I actually had a little kind of mantra that I would say sometimes out loud, sometimes in my head. It was just chin up, keep moving. And
mm,
because at some points in that whole thing, that's really all I could hold on to, was just, okay, we just have to keep moving. We're not going
mm,
back. We're not rewriting what the goal is here. We're just going to keep on moving. And I think
mm,
that's where that came from, just knowing that I had to have that solid inspiration about what I was working towards, and then just keep at it. And I always say that courage is the word that goes in the middle there, that, you need that the inspiration, and you need the courage, and then you need the tenacity. But of course, that would make it a little more awkward of a name, with inspired courageous tenacity. but but I think for a lot of women going through major shifts in our lives, that's those words together
mm.
just really hit home.
Yeah. And what's so interesting, and just as I'm bringing that up, similar to when we were talking about the book and a topic around the book, and how you've created a platform for women to come towards a topic or to have a conversation about something specific, and that's a common denominator. And it's really funny, just as we're having this conversation, I'm like, oh, your business name, and I identified with that. And then when we connected, then I just thought we've had so many similar circumstances, and even starting the business out of a place of transition and a place of challenge and a place where we don't want to go back and we're moving forward. And so isn't that interesting how life is mirroring some of those projects that you're working on, or the
Oh,
way that you
definitely, yes.
develop a project? So you have
And
a really broad community too. What does that look like for you once you've come through a book project and you've got 20, I think it is, 20 women that have contributed?
20 to 25, yes. And I would say one of the benefits that COVID brought into my life was that we kind of just started connecting globally so
Mm,
easily. And my community exploded throughout those couple of years of just living on Zoom practically. And now it's just a normal part of my day that I'll be, in a meeting with somebody in Europe or the UK in the morning, in the afternoon, someone in Australia or out that way, and in the middle, it could be anywhere. And that's just normal now. And actually, lately,
mm.
I've been noticing that my local community, so at home, when I think, okay, I should go out for coffee, I should get out of the house, and I think, oh, who's close by? Who? And it's amazing that I am just so used to living on Zoom with people all over the world that this idea of who can I just go for coffee with
I'll put
is
my
a
hand up
challenging
for that one
question.
too. Yeah, exactly. It's funny because we just started, we were doing a lot of local workshops here in Calgary for people planning their own events, and obviously that all stopped and everything kind of came to that halt over this pandemic. And then coming back, and I'm doing an in-person series this fall, and I joke that it's kind of like a reunion because many of
Yes.
us, like, we still meet, but it's either on Zoom or it's on a Zoom webinar. We're seeing each other, and or social media, and we're connecting that way, but to be in person eating popcorn, having a drink, and listening to a presentation together, we've learned not to take it for granted when there are people close by. But I do love what you're saying about the expansion of the community, and when you have a universal topic like some of those that
Mhm.
you do with your book projects,
Yes.
it isn't contained to your local community or just to British Columbia or just to Canada, that this is something that, what a beautiful community you've built, then, that you have people feeding in from all over the world.
Yeah, and my big focus has always been on helping women change their life in a good way.
Mm,
And that theme in general is so universal.
hmm.
And now, so many of these things, as I bump into different women working on different things and bring them into my circle, it's helped me to learn about so many different things and to be exposed to their story and their experience. And in my original career, as I mentioned, I used to work in medical genetics. And so my background is in science and tech. So I've always got a place in my heart for women that still work in those fields. So I always have a special book project on the go for those women as well.
Mm,
And so in March, we had one come out that was Women Transforming the Landscape of Science and Tech. And right now we've got one just bringing in new authors. It'll be closing pretty soon. That one's called The Evolution of Leadership in Science and Tech, Women
hmm.
Catalyzing Change. So
Interesting.
it's been amazing the women that I've bumped into and gotten to know in all these different fields that were areas that I didn't even know about.
And you're on book number 12 now, is that right? That one
Of
just
the books that
launched?
I've been involved in, yes, yes.
How exciting. Congratulations for that. That's a
Thank you.
huge milestone. Do you
Yes,
have a
yeah.
favorite?
That's a very good question. I think I would have to say Embrace Courage if I have to pick one. And that's probably because that was my first solo project. Like in that was when I decided this is what I am going to do with my business. And so that was the first book that I came up with the title, the theme, did the cover image, brought together the whole team of women working on it. Actually, that one, we had a few men in that one as well. And for last year, my word of the year was courage.
Hmm.
And that's kind of where that stemmed from too, that I was being courageous and stepping into this whole other thing that I'd never done before. But I
Hmm.
felt the value there that this was such an important stepping stone for women to expand their business, expand their communities, step into completely new possibilities. But then at the same time, for myself, to take that on and say, okay, I am doing this now. And if
Right.
you'd asked me 5 years ago, if you'd said, oh, you're going to get involved in publishing, you're going to be, creating book projects, 5 years ago, I would have laughed at you because that was not anywhere on my radar.
I was going to ask you that. So it wasn't something that when you were growing up, you're like, I'm going
No,
to put
no,
books together. I just love sort of
never,
the
never, never. And the
really.
funniest part of that part of the conversation is that I'm actually dyslexic. So if you go back into my university years, I don't think I
Uh-huh.
finished a book the whole time. Class
Wow.
notes were my favorite thing, and
Uh-huh.
I just had strategies around how can I absorb the information I need to learn the stuff that
Wow.
I need to learn. So
Yep.
yes, so for someone who was dyslexic and spelling, slow reading, all those fun things are a challenge my whole life, to
Huh.
go from that to deciding that books are my whole business now, or a big part of
Wow.
them, then yeah, that's a huge step.
That is huge. And so what has become your superpower in this now because of that background?
I think my, and I do love that LinkedIn now has created dyslexic thinking as an actual skill,
Mm,
because that's something that a lot of people who aren't dyslexic don't understand, that part of it. And a big
right.
part of that superpower is thinking big. So to be able to look at something and see it from a whole different, just high level, bringing all kinds of different moving parts into it. I like to describe it like a web, just a web of interacting parts, and what's that going to look like. And I think in the books, helps me a lot because I can think about it from that high level and look down on, okay, what do I want to create here? Who am I bringing in? What's the end goal? But it's just kind of that creative part of bringing it together. I think is one
Boy,
of
that
the
is
key
like the
parts.
definition of tenacity. Honestly, this is creative expression for you too, as much as you've got authors feeding in, but how you're putting this together, there's a lot of work behind the scenes to make these things happen. And
Yes,
what a
yes.
what a cool for anyone out there that's listening that feels like maybe there's a barrier there for you, that you're struggling with, maybe that's just a path that you couldn't take because of something like this.
Mhm.
There's always that opportunity to rethink and just say, how could I be creative and courageous in this moment to take a step to something that really lights me up? And you're just, people can't see that, but you're just glowing and clearly love the work that you do, which is fantastic. That's amazing. And what a gift to so many women.
Exactly. And I like to tell everyone that this really is available to everyone.
Hmm.
And so just because you haven't written anything before, just because you don't see yourself as an author, don't let those slow you down. And these days we have so many technical tools we can use. So you can be speaking your story into your computer or your phone, and then it puts it into written text. We've got professional editors that we work with. So you don't have to be the perfect editor yourself.
Hmm.
We have people that do that. And I do the kind of base overall kind of first check, but I am not the one that does the final edits. Yes.
It's so inspiring to have this conversation. We just made it through in October, beautifully made it through our ultimate event experience, which is our retreat for planners. And I declared that I don't like writing. And I'm in the middle of putting a book together right now. And it's a challenge for me. It's really hard. And I hear that's again, an experience a lot of writers feel, where it's just hard to sit down, not just find the time, but when you, even if I have the time, it's like it's really hard to put what I'm thinking onto my computer. And it's so encouraging just to hear your story, how there are supports in place, and probably more and more all the time it's becoming almost normalized, ways that students can learn, ways that people can get their stories out, ways that we can express ourselves. And again, that curiosity and the courage to say there's something. My line is always, there's more to come.
You're just
That
getting
just feels
started.
sad. Yeah, exactly.
Yes, and there definitely are different strategies around if you're actually looking at writing a whole book yourself, and just different things around breaking it down into those chapters, breaking those chapters into subsections, and not even feeling like you have to do it in order. If right now I
Right.
feel like writing about this part, then I go write
Oh,
about that
that's
part.
me.
And well, exactly. So this idea that it has to be done from point 1 over to point 10 and in that order,
Mm.
in that structure, let that go. Look for more playful ways of doing it.
Oh, I love that. That's fantastic. And so when we think about you as a best-selling author and a speaker, and you've got coaching and mentorship in all of this, and that's shining through in how you're describing your work. What are you most excited about as you lead into 2024 now? You're kind of mapping out what next year looks like. What are you excited about creating or being part of?
Well, it's interesting because one of my goals while I've been working on books has been to actually meet more of these women that are in my books. And
Hmm.
so, kind of this vision of traveling the world, meeting some of these people, doing events together has always been kind of what's in the back of my mind. And I see that now starting to happen. And I'm getting involved in organizing events and retreats in different places around the world where I can bring women together. And
Ah.
last week I was in San Diego for an event, and I actually got the opportunity to meet with one of my other friends that was down there that just happens to live in the area. She wasn't part of the event itself, but she's one of my authors that we've known each other for almost 2 years now on
Ah.
Zoom, but we've never met before. So this has kind of become the beginning of that bigger vision of mine to actually meet these women that I'm working with. And in
Ah.
January, I've got a retreat in Mexico that I'm organizing. So again, it'll be a great opportunity to bring together some of these women that I've worked with, but chances are never met.
And when you were talking earlier, like, who do you go for coffee with? You're just like flying somewhere to have a
That's
different
right.
type of coffee. Nothing wrong with that. I think a lot of people would applaud you for that. And when women come together, it's amazing what can happen. And when we have that common denominator where we're sharing a goal. And some of my best friends have come out of projects that I've been working on. And I used to beat myself up for that. I'm like, why can't I just have a random friend that isn't part of, some kind of big goal that we were trying to reach? And I realized over time that it actually is because we're putting so much of ourselves into a project or an event or something that we're pulling together because we see all the parts of us when we put something like that together, and it allows us to share, I think, on a deeper level than maybe just somebody you just randomly met.
Oh,
And so
definitely.
I love that when you're traveling the world and creating these events, that would be a beautiful way for us to wrap this conversation today. If you could share next year, we're going to put that out there. Next year, when you're traveling the world and you're running events and you're bringing these women together, what would be some of those things that you want to make sure that these things happen so that the women can connect well and so that it's a meaningful gathering?
One of the things that I find to be such a critical key ingredient is that feeling of safety.
Mm.
To know that you are in a circle of people where how you feel and what you think and what you're up to, it's a safe place to play with that, to bring it up, to say what's on your mind, what you're thinking, what you're doing. And to me, I think for many of us who do want to step into something different or want to try something new, and again, I feel like in our 50s and 60s and into our 70s and 80s is the time for us to be really stepping into things that we've never done before, like bringing all of our skills and wisdom with us to apply to these new things, but really stepping into what excites us. And I think to do that, we need to connect with a community who is willing to hear that and support that and encourage it. Whereas
Mm.
many of us find that our immediate family and friends will often kind of squash any weird, strange, big ideas that we might come up with. So finding that group and that community that is there for you,
Mm.
I think, is such a huge factor in creating success.
Beautiful. And somebody like yourself that can really ensure that that safety is there and that the event is designed to be safe and welcoming and open, and I'm sure with lots of room for conversation. What a beautiful world we would live in if these types of gatherings were happening and if that safety was just expected too. You know, we talk a lot about
Oh, yes.
psychological safety in
Yes.
workplaces, and we do need people in our communities that are those organizers and the planners and the people that have that big picture kind of
Yes.
view that you do, to say, this is what it could look like, and I believe it's actually possible.
Exactly.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you so much for your time today. This has just been an inspiring way for me to spend an afternoon. Thank you so much for taking the time. And I so look forward to more collaborations and learning more about your work and leaning in where I can to support you. Thank you so much for being here and sharing a bit of your story today.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's always exciting to have fun conversations and see where they go.
And one of those coffees can happen here in Calgary someday. So if you're ever like flying over and you have a
That's
stopover,
right.
let me know.
We'll have to find the right
Awesome.
time of year.
That's
When do I want to be in
exactly.
Calgary?
Yes, that can change day to day. So awesome. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
The Connector Next Door podcast is produced by Candy Event Consulting, where everyday event planners and their teams gain clarity, get connected, and grow in confidence. Subscribe at www.candyconsulting.ca to hear visits with everyday event planners who are putting connections first.